This conference will now be recorded.
Right, so welcome to the Big Book Anon workshop. My name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic and an Anon. Could we please have a moment's silence? Thank you. This workshop is for members of Al-Anon, S-Anon, or other Anon fellowships, or those interested in the subject matter. We will examine the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as they can be practiced to solve the problems arising out of alcoholism or addiction in someone we're close to. We are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship. Our views are our own and do not reflect the position taken by any particular 12-step fellowship. This is not a substitute for membership of or attendance of a 12-step fellowship. We aim merely to share our experience. If that experience is beneficial, we're pleased. Each week, a number of presenters will present on the step in question. There will then be room for questions and answers plus discussion. The sessions will last an hour or so. During each session, send the organisers any questions you have using the chat function. We're recording this session. Audio recordings of the workshop plus written materials are made available at the workshop blog. Links are posted during the meeting. Today, we're examining step 4, specifically the fear inventory, if I'm not mistaken. Just nod one of the other organisers if that sounds right. Okay. I'll start off by giving a formal presentation of my understanding of the step. There will then be other speakers who will go into more detail about how their experience informs their understanding of the step. So I'm just sharing the screen. As that is waiting to appear on your screens, I'm going to say a little opening prayer. Cause me to have all the honesty, open-mindedness, willingness I may need here and now. I ask for the guidance, love, and wisdom that I need to work through this process and gain the most I can at this time. I am as willing as I can be to set aside everything I even think I know about this area, this way of life, so that my chances for an open mind and to be teachable are better, so that I may realize your 3 spiritual gifts, awakening to you, to be the love that I am, and to be the individual you created me as. Thank you. So we're on fear. Just to recap, we've made a decision in step 3 to turn our wills and our lives over to the care of a power greater than ourselves, because we've been making a sorry mess of things on our own, to put it very bluntly. Now, fear. I just want to say something about fear in an Anon context. In my experience, I mean, I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been someone that is irresponsible and doesn't take responsibility for things that are my responsibility. And that's going to engender fear, because you know that no one is coming to save you. It's your job to do. It's not going to get done because you're not doing it. The other error, and the longer I've been in recovery, the more I tend towards this error. I mean, some of you may identify with this. Have you ever woken up in the morning hyper responsible, like responsible for everything? And immediately it's like there is a queue of people to talk to you. I don't mean literal people, actual people. I mean people in your head, little characters with clipboards telling you all the things which are going to go wrong, because overnight they've been scanning the horizon, they've been scanning the future, they've been scanning every part of your life, and they've come up with a list of disaster scenarios that you have to act now on. And now, if you have any sense, you'll realize you are powerless over most of these, but you still feel responsible. And this is a form of confusion. If I'm powerless, I'm not responsible. Let me just say that again. If I'm powerless, I'm not responsible. Anyway, we'll come to that. What we've got in this reading on the screen is, as usual, the big book in blue, and then some comments below in black. And we're on page 68 if you want to follow along in your little books at home. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. I've got a quotation here from the 12 and 12. The chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear, primarily fear that we would lose something we already possessed or would fail to get something we demanded. Living upon a basis of unsatisfied demands, we were in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had until we could find a means of reducing these demands. The difference between a demand and a simple request is plain to anyone. So the takeout from that is that if I'm frightened, it's because I've got demands. And what are demands? Demands are when I'm playing God. It's when I'm saying how the world ought to be, and either the world isn't like it or it's not going to be like it. I'm sitting in God's seat. That's why when I don't know about you, when I'm frightened, what goes hand in hand with the hyper responsibility is this terrible sense of weight and burden, like you're carrying something. You know, those pictures of the Greek god Atlas, who is literally carrying the world on his shoulders. And so the fear, it feels like I'm a victim of something, but actually the way I've set the ball rolling is by coming into the universe and saying, well, I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I don't like this. I don't like that. It's not supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to be like that. Right. How are we going to sort things out? This is playing God. If I didn't have a list of things that weren't okay, then I couldn't be frightened. So playing God, so fear comes from demands. Demands come from playing God. Playing God is wanting something other than God's will, which is why it keeps saying throughout the program, thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. Someone's just asked, is this material available later? Yes, it's already on the blog as a post, and if you follow the links through as a PDF. So fear comes from demands. Demands come from playing God. Playing God is wanting something other than God's will. And another way to put that is wanting the universe to suit us rather than fitting ourselves to be of maximum service to God and others, which is what it says on page 77. So that's the general introduction to fear. Now, the next line in the book is, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So the best way to do this practically, you've already written a gazillion fears in the page 67 questions. Take those out, put them on a fresh sheet of paper, and then brainstorm to complete the list. Now, I don't know about you, when I ask my brain, what are you frightened of? It already has the list. It's been waiting there with the clipboard for some time. It's already impatient. My difficulty is writing the fears down fast enough. With each one, what I want to do is find out what's behind the fear to get to the core fear. And I've got some examples here. So scared of losing a job. Why? Well, I'm frightened that I won't have enough money. In fact, I'll be poor. I won't have any status. People will think he's been on the planet for 5 decades and he can't even make a living. I'll be a failure. I'll be an identity. If I don't have a job, who am I? Scared of old age, fear of death, fear of having to be wheeled around, fear of loss of identity, being another old person in the corner, fear of physical pain, scared of losing a relationship. Why? Fear of failure. Again, I don't, it's quite often, I've heard this a lot, that somehow in recovery you failed if you don't have a successful, wonderful relationship with something called intimacy the whole time. People always talk about intimacy, and if you don't have it, whatever that is, you failed. What's your recovery worth if you don't have a relationship? So to get to the core fears behind them, you're going to have a lot of fears on the surface if you're like me, but there's a list of core fears which are below those, and those are the root causes. And there's usually a pretty limited list of those. Here's a list of ones that I connect with: loneliness, disconnection, separation, loss of identity, worthlessness, powerlessness, physical pain, emotional pain. The state of fear itself becomes circular. When you're frightened of being frightened, so you're frightened. Guilt, shame, freedom. If you're free and you get to make a choice, you might get it wrong. If any of you have ever phoned up a sponsor and asked them to think something through for you or make a decision for you, maybe the underlying fear is freedom or choice. And then what I try and do is summarize this with a short list of core fears that essentially explain the rest. Now, this is where it gets to the good bit. We asked ourselves why we had them. Now, Bill Wilson, one of the co-founders of AA, wrote this. And sometimes he'll ask a rhetorical question. So we asked ourselves why we had them. So I say to myself, so why have I got these fears? And then he says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? He doesn't trust me to come up with the right answer myself. So he's telling me the answer in the form of a question. So let's just pretend that he's smarter than I am and say, well, he's right. So, okay, self-reliance failed us. Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So let's examine this proposition. And the way to examine a proposition, I've learned is, or been taught, is to treat it as though it's true and try to apply it. And then by applying it, you see if it's true. I mean, that's not how I used to. My first response to a new idea historically was to reject it. I knew I felt very strongly about it. I didn't know what I thought about it, but I knew I felt very strongly about it. I don't like it. I don't like new ideas, but that doesn't help. You take the idea and you treat it as though it's true. As an acquaintance of mine said, my assent is not a valuable contribution to the truth. Me saying that true is true does not add to the truth of something. It might make me more rational or comfortable, but it doesn't make me saying something is true, does not make it true. It's already true. It was here first. I've just come across it. So what is self? We're saying self-reliance failed us. What is self? Put very simply, the identity in the world we build for ourselves plus the life that reflects it. Nationality, origin, ethnicity, sex, sexuality, gender, career, where we live, whether we live on this side of the line, whether we live on that side of the line, who we vote for, who we definitely don't vote for. All of these things are self. And you say, well, if that's not who I am, what am I? This is in contrast to who and what God wants us to be in order to achieve God's purpose. And a good way of thinking about that is that I'm spirit temporarily housed in a physical form, and my problem is my mistaking myself for the form. Now, this identity, this person I'm trying to make of myself in the world, this forms the basis for the ego's blueprint for my life. So all of my career aspirations, all of my aspirations for what my flat should look like, are all linked to an idea of status, of who I am in the world. Now, if you've observed the laws of physics, if you've observed your own, I mean, I don't know about you, but I have a lot of plans. I could write a book about all the plans I had, which I never fulfilled. All the books I said I was going to read and never read. All the languages I said I was going to learn and never got the hang of. All of the places I said I was going to go and never went. All the things I thought I'd be brilliant at and I was terrible at. You'll notice if you pay very close attention to the flat or house you live in, everything is constantly disintegrating, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. And then we've got other people. So it's all very well having this blueprint for the universe for how things should be. The trouble is, nothing ever looks like the blueprint. And everything eventually crumbles, even if you get it perfect. 5 years later, 10 years later, the paint is peeling. It's the end of the world. And the net result of this is I look at the past, I don't like it. I look at the present, I don't like it. I'm looking at the future, I don't like it because it's not how I want it to be. So fear, if I'm frightened, the three things that really matter are who am I, it's identity, purpose, what am I here for, and safety. And fear is always a sign I'm looking for identity in what is changeable. So whatever I do, I get attached to. So my career, it's all very well having an identity in your career when it's going well. What about when the work dries up? Purpose in what is uncertain. Again, it's fine if the project comes on, but if your purpose is to do, let's say your purpose is to get someone sober and they don't get sober, you've failed. Your purpose is confounded. If your purpose, by contrast, is to simply carry the message, you can do that successfully, whatever the outcome. Safety. It's a common image of building sand castles on the beach and trying to move into them, live in them, and looking for safety in the world. To not be frightened if I see my safety as being inherent in the material world, I'd have to be in denial or psychotic or pretty dumb or busy. You wonder why you're busy. Maybe it's to run away from the fear. Just maybe. If you're busy, you're either absorbed or exhausted. You're either doing the work of 10 people or you're doing the work of no people. There's never any time to sit. Relying on self, the identity in the material world and the life that reflects it, fails. What does it mean to say it fails? It produces misery internally and chaos externally. Being frightened is really uncomfortable. It's much more uncomfortable being angry. You don't think so at the time until you're frightened. Then you wish you were angry because at least someone else is going to get it. It's not me that's going to get it. Onto the solution. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. So this is the solution that's been given to me, which grows out of this passage. I'm in the world, I'm not of the world. I've been sent here disguised as a human being made of flesh. All the things that happen to me in the world happen to my physical body or my image of myself. They don't happen to me. They don't happen to my spirit. My spirit, the spirit breathed into me, cannot be harmed. And that is the basis for my sense of safety. And also the basis for my identity. If who I really am is a chip off the old block, is a little atom, an undivided atom of God, at some level, as a co-creator of the world on the seventh day of creation. That's my identity. And that identity can't be affected by what you do to me, or whatever happens in the world. I got the very strong, I'm not saying I'm psychic, but I have experiences. Let's just put it like that. When my father died many years ago, I got this enormous, I knew when it happened because I felt it, and then I was told afterwards that was the moment he died. This always happens when someone I'm close to dies. I got the sense, oh, he's gone home. Everything's fine. Everything was always fine. Everything was always going to be all right because now he's home. So what were any of us worried about? He was never worried, FYI. It was everyone else who was worried. Whatever little journey he was on was done. He was fine. He was home safe. And I haven't been frightened of death since then. So, but I am here, housed in this physical form, and I'm here to play roles. And there are lots of different roles. You know, I have my own business and I teach, and I'm an AA member, and I do all this AA service, and I sponsor people, and I'm a husband, and I'm a son, and I'm all sorts of other things. Now, my problem, and this is what self is, I've mistaken myself for the roles, so the fate of the role becomes my fate. So my flat is not in the greatest repair, according to my ego. Perhaps it's fine, who knows? But, you know, scanning, always finding things wrong. If my role is homeowner, if the home doesn't look good, there's something wrong with me. My purpose has been confounded. The fate of the role becomes my fate. This is called attachment. So it's like a stock market. If you're invested in the stock market, when the stock market goes up, you're happy. When the stock market goes down, you're not. And it's the same with anything. You know, if the job goes badly, if the kid does badly, if the sponsee drinks, if the train is late, there's a problem. Now, one solution, sometimes people try to pretend there is nothing here at all. And such people are disconcerting. They're referred to by Ken Wapnick, the ACIM teacher, as bliss ninnies, who turn a completely blind eye to everything. So the solution is a bit more sophisticated than just pretending that there's nothing happening. The solution is not to lose the roles. The solution is to remember we're actors whilst playing the roles. So the actor is fine, whatever happens to the role. The actor may feel whatever the character is going through. In fact, may need to feel whatever the character is going through to play the role properly. So if you ask an actor who's played Macbeth or Hamlet how the actor is doing after the play is done, he's fine. Now, if you could ask the character Macbeth or Hamlet how they're doing at the end of their respective plays, not so good. You know, neither of them had a great day, but they're glad they're at a meeting, you know. So all we have to do is play the part without getting lost in the part. This is where the phrase comes, doing the next right thing, taking the next indicated action. And to rely on God for three things: identity, I'm spirit, I'm not the character I'm playing. Purpose, to do God's will, not to achieve the character's aim. So my aim is to play Macbeth well. My aim is not, I don't make Macbeth's aim my aim. I've just got to play the character well. And safety, as spirit, I cannot be harmed and will exist for all eternity. Although, as I said, we feel what the characters feel, and that's part of the deal. If you're going to be here, you're going to have some feelings. Well, there we go. But funnily enough, even difficult feelings, people actually don't have a problem with. Have you noticed how people will go to a very sad film, or a harrowing film, or a film where there's lots of injustice, and feel all the feelings, and you say, how was the film? Oh, it was wonderful. I had a wonderful time. So apparently, feeling the full range of human feelings is not the problem. Feelings are not the problem. There's something else. What's helpful to me is to recognize that my purpose, God's purpose, I don't get to find out what that is. I get to find out how that purpose is to play out in my life. God, what do you want me to do today? Certainly the characters don't know they're in a play. They don't know what the purpose is. So if you ask Macbeth, what's Shakespeare's purpose in writing Macbeth, he wouldn't have heard of Shakespeare. So if you're trapped as one of the characters, you're so not in contact with the higher power. You don't even know the higher power exists in any real sense. Only the actor can have some kind of contact with the higher power. But honestly, it's only the playwright, the higher power, who really knows. So that's why it's okay not to just do the next right thing and not understand why. And to trust that the small actions of today are enough. My ego would have me believe that unless I'm changing the world in some radical headline-making way, well, what's the point even? And this George Eliot quote is not bad. The growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that these things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. George Eliot, this is not a program recommendation, but George Eliot is worth. Silas Marner is also particularly good. One of her novels. So we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be once we commence to outgrow fear. So anything that we achieve flows from God working through us. We're not taking the credit. And the practical moment-by-moment response to fear is ask God to remove the fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. So quite simply, in any situation, what would God have me do? Where would God have me go? Who would God have me talk to? What would God have me think? What would God have me do? There's one final point. If I make the decision to believe the fearful thoughts that come into my life, God will not overturn that decision. This is the downside of being given free will. The downside of being given free will is that I have the will to choose what to believe, and God will not override that without my permission. If I choose to disbelieve what my ego mind, my alcoholic mind, my anonic mind says to me, if I choose to disbelieve that and say, you know what, it has no authority, it's just a physical brain producing all sorts of rubbish, God, give me another thing to think, I will be shown another way. I'm responsible for redirecting my attention. So when I've experienced God not removing the fear, it's because I still believe my fearful assessment of the situation. And when I'm done with that, then I'm in with a chance. So I'm going to post some links during the course of the meeting. I'm now going to ask people to come in and share their experience for 5 minutes or so each. If you've got less to share, that's fine. Osho, would you like to come in and share?
Thanks so much, Tim. Hi, everyone. I'm Osher, grateful member of Al-Anon, and just getting to my notes here. Okay, wait. Here we go. So I'll say that these paragraphs on fear in the Big Book are some of my favorites in the book. I read them again and again. My suggestion to those who this is new for them is to read them over and over and let them sink in. So it says that fear touched every aspect of our lives. My first fears list when I was very, very new in recovery was 7 pages long, single spaced. I was afraid of everything and its opposite. So I realized that that was a no-win situation, and that fear was irrational. And so I just want to share some hope that nowadays my lists are shorter and shorter of fears. It says that fear brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. You know, I grew up in an alcoholic home, and so my untreated Al-Anon parent believed and still believes that life in the entire universe is all about him and his misfortune. You know, when I tell him that I called a company and I had trouble with the customer service representative, he says, because they knew you were related to me, right? Like, so the entire universe is kind of set out to cause me misfortune. And so that's what I grew up with, and that's what I was taught. And I'm so grateful to not be living in that today. Early in recovery, I was told that it's okay to be angry at higher power. So I spent years and years and years angry at higher power and telling higher power that higher power is not doing what I think should be done in my life. And so if you're at that place, my experience, strength, and hope, I've already done the research and development there, is not to stay there for as long as I did. I stayed there for well over a decade, because it ate me up, it ate up the people around me. I really didn't make very much spiritual progress during that time. I found that sometimes I just feel a big ball of fear, and that's unhelpful. I had a sponsor who used to repeat to me over and over that the disease hates specifics, or the ego hates specifics. And so what I share with people when they call me with lots and lots of fears is to sit down, to spend some time in prayer and meditation, and to write a list as specific as possible as to what your fears are. And a lot of that was set forth in Tim's notes. A couple of my core fears are fear of abandonment and fear that I'm unlovable, and that comes directly from growing up in an alcoholic home. And so I do see those come up a lot and play out a lot in my relationships, and I own them and know that, you know, that's my fear, and now I need to do the work. You know, it's not about what the other person is doing, it's about my fear. Mistaking myself for my roles in life, for me, is another way of taking myself too damn seriously, which is talked about in AA literature. As part of my daily prayers every day, I read and repeat to myself and internalize an 11-step corrective measure, and we'll talk about that more in the 11th step. But for me, it connects here with regard to fear, and I'll share it with you. And it says that I am spirit and thereby immortal. I am a part of higher power, so I can't leave higher power ever, period. Higher power is always me. I am not separate. Fear is not real. It is an illusion that I made up. And I'll end with sharing that one of my favorite mantras in recent years is that everything is okay. Tim actually shared with me that often Anons have this feeling all the time that something's not okay, something. So, you know, some person's not okay, I'm not okay, the situation's not okay. And so I've just started, you know, really using as a mantra when I'm in a situation that I find very confusing and very difficult for me, just I'm okay, and the other person's okay, and everything's okay, and we're all higher power, and it's all okay. So thanks.
Thank you. I'd just like to draw attention to the very good question here. I have fear of fear itself, of being locked into fear and being paralyzed. I have OCD type behaviors which seem inbuilt and mechanical. How can I use a spiritual program to overcome these behaviors? I'm just very, very briefly, it's a big question. But the short version is that, so I've, throughout a lot of my life, had OCD behaviors. I'm not going to go into the specific diagnoses. I have some diagnoses. But my behaviors always come at some level from my beliefs. When the underlying beliefs change, And I, in retrospect, questioned what was I believing that was causing me to become so obsessive about X, Y, and Z, and to counteract that at the level of belief, and simply to say to myself, and I mean, the real answer is a lot bigger. It's the whole program of spiritual growth. This is just one example of saying to myself, I believe I'm only okay if everything in my flat is completely tidy. What if that weren't true? What if everything were okay, even if it's chaos, even if it collapses, even if I lose it, and I'm still okay? Isn't that an interesting idea? I don't believe it, but isn't that an interesting idea? Just starting to play with the opposite of the beliefs which underlie my neurotic behavior. That was just super helpful. Elisheva, would you like to share?
Hi, my name is Elisheva. I'm a member of Al-Anon and Al-Anon. When I first read the big book and I got to the part of driven by 100 forms of fear, so I thought that's not me. I mean, I know I have a few fears, but I really didn't see most of my fears. And looking back, I see that I was too scared to allow myself to see my fears. And I can't force myself to see what I don't see, but I want to become aware of what I don't see, because as long as I'm not aware of it, it controls me. And I found that through working the steps again and again, through living in 10, 11, and 12, I built trust in God, and slowly I was able to see more and more of my fears. When I write my own script of how I want my life to look, I develop a plan of how to get what I want and how to keep what I have. And all those things are things that I can lose, and that leads me to fear. And that's when I set the ball rolling. I push God and his plan aside, and I put myself and my plan in the center of my life. And I forget that I'm completely dependent on God for everything, and I rely on self. And I thought I was supposed to rely on self, that that's what it means being an adult, and that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And when I'm self-reliant, I fill with fear. Most of my fears, or a lot of my fears at least, turn into resentments. And when I have fear and resentment, I take actions that harm people. Then I'm full of shame and guilt over the harms that I've caused. And then not only do I have the original fear and resentment, I begin to fear retribution from God and people. I found that many times the actions that I take to keep what I want and get what I want end up causing the exact opposite of what I want to happen. So when I people please or control, I tend to push people in the opposite direction that I want them to go. And then ego comes in and says, you see, there really was what to fear. And the lesson that I learned is that ego's right. I should fear, and I should take even more actions the next time the fear comes up. Through working the steps, I'm learning to put God in the center of my life and to pray for the knowledge of his will and the power to carry that out. And I'm learning that I'm totally dependent on God on everything, and that the less attachments I have to end results, the more open I'll be to following God's plan for me. One of the things that I learned here is that everything is either love or fear. And when I'm in fear, I've turned away from God, who created me. God is love. He created me in love, and he created me to share his love with others. So from the time I was a child, I was taught that I should not have fear, because fear is a lack of trust in God. And as a religious person, I should always trust God. So I tried to convince myself that there's nothing to be fearful about. And that never hurt me. That never worked for me. And then I tried to fight the fear, but what I fight empowers what I'm fighting. I can't talk myself out of my fear, and I can't fight my way through fear. What I needed to do is stop resisting. And last week I was feeling fear, and the thought came to me to lie down on my back and just spread my hands out. And I imagined the fear raining down on me from the sky. And I said, welcome, fear. Stay as long as you need to. And it was an experience I had never had before. It was the gift of surrender. And I was no longer afraid of feeling the fear. And then it stayed as long as it stayed, and it went away. And then later that day, I felt the fear again. I was in a place where I couldn't just lie down on my back. So I closed my eyes and I envisioned myself lying on my back with my arms spread out, the fear raining down on me. And again, I said, welcome, stay as long as you need to. And even while the fear was there, I was no longer scared of the fear, and the fear wasn't in the driver's seat anymore. Fear and love can't reside together. When I fill with love, fear is gently pushed out of the picture. And when I don't feel that I have enough love in my life, it's not because I'm lacking in receiving love. It's always because I'm lacking in giving love. And one of the things here I found very helpful was Jim W.'s daily reader, Pay It Forward. He writes under the pen name Alcoholic, and he talks about outrageous acts of love. And when I take daily outrageous acts of love, I'm given more and more love, and there's less and less fear. If I wait for the fear to disappear before I'm going to take certain actions, I think I'll probably never end up taking the actions. And so what I learned is that I can take the actions while I'm feeling fear. I could pray to God to take it and then take the next right step, whether I feel the fear or not. And again, the fear is no longer in the driver's seat. And slowly, as I take the right actions, the perceptions of the fear starts to disappear. And another thing that I find very helpful is reminding myself that I'm spirit, I'm a part of God, eternal and never changing, which means that no matter what's happening in the physical world, nothing's ever changed in the spiritual world. Everything always stays the same. Everything's always good. It always was and it always will be. I'll end with that.
Thank you. I'm posting some additional materials on fear as we speak in the blog. I'm adding some links there to some useful things. There's a very good Course in Miracles teacher called Earl Purdy who's brilliant. The Pay It Forward meditation book, I'm going to save that in the online folder where the recordings are, so you have access to that. And there's some other stuff as well that I'm posting. Emma, would you like to share?
So thanks for that. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. I always ask myself when I start this fear inventory, I've done it a number of times, is what am I actually trying to do? And I find that when I start to come from that place, I kind of get a sense of feeling, okay, I know where I'm kind of heading. And really for me, my idea was I'm unblocking myself. I'm unblocking myself. There is a path, a pipe that's blocked, and I am and have always been connected to God, and it's me putting things there that I need to unblock. And when I think about it, and it says it in the book, as we've mentioned, that, you know, the root cause of all this is my self-centeredness, and I just don't want to be that way anymore. A sponsor of mine once told me that the reason that fear is bracketed in the big book beside self-esteem is that they're completely interlinked, because the root of all my troubles obviously is a false sense of self. And once I admit that to myself, that is a starting point that I can move again forward from. My self-worth has always, since I'm a kid, I cannot tell you, 8 years old in a swimming meet, and it's always been dependent on what others thought of me. In a swimming meet, trying to win a race so that I could have accolation, and so that I could be said, you know, I get a round of applause and everyone will love me. And thing is that I didn't actually win. So when I went home, I had to kind of make up a story so that my parents would believe I'd won, because they hadn't come. And like, I knew then, like looking back on it now, like what is going on for me at 8, this is what I was doing already. I think I always saw danger everywhere, whether it was made up or not, and I saw it, and it just simply frightened me. And I, for as far back as I can remember that, and the fear of coming home and not having won that swim meet is still with me today. Like my heart races when I think about it, and having gone home and actually told I had. I heard an Al-Anon share, and it said that life is this beautiful tapestry. It has the potential to be exquisite, and it always has that potential because we're all part of God, and we have woven these threads of fear through it. And there, the tapestry we're looking at suddenly becomes something it was never intended to be. And I chose it. I've set the ball rolling, and that is something that sits with me. That imagery. It's not always so easy to look at it that way, but I think as we unpick it, the tapestry can go back to being the exquisite thing it was always meant to be. When I asked myself why, like Tim described at the beginning, and it was said in the big book that self-reliance failed me, I really wasn't very pleased with that, because I've always thought that I can do this. This is what I need to be independent. I can do this. I need to force my way out of fear. The resistance was not helpful at all. Until I came to program, it's what I strongly believed, hearing that there's something so much bigger and has so much potential to create such a better life, has given me, well, relief and freedom. And the actions of beginning to trust and relying on God through, for me, was, like we did in the resentment, forgive everyone everything. That was a big deal. To pray and to have that constant chatter with God, not just formal prayer, but to be connected. He's here, he's right here, and he's with me. Seeing him working in my life, seeing the little bits of my day that he's here, and I think for me that was something that is so beautiful, that I went from self-reliance to this kind of he's here and he's present, trusting the process, doing the work, because the more I do the work in this program, the more I feel his presence here. And when I do feel separated from God, which is sometimes, I ask myself, what's going on for me now? And I pretty much always come back to fear. And those actions, the prayer, the feeling in presence, seeing him here, looking out the window and seeing the magnificence of the trees, nobody could do that. It has to be something greater. The more I work the steps, the more I work with sponsees, the more I see him. And that second step that gives us the belief, and then the 4 to 9 who helps us to have the tools and to really work on my trust. And I find that, the more I do it with sponsees, the more I do it myself, the more that trust is. There's that line where, how can my little mind compare to the infinite mind of God? I find, for me, that's a question I ask myself. Hang on, Emma, what's actually happening here? And how can I be trusting me here? Just stop a second, look at what's real. And, it's been discussed, the role the world assigns to us. And I really, really believed for such a long time that I was that role. And I was that role, and I am that role, and that's all there is. And I forget sometimes. And I think for me, having that kind of vision of who I want to be and how God has, I'm just playing a role, and that it's so much bigger. And that if I believe that, then that calamity with matching serenity, seriously, why should I be afraid? There is nothing to be afraid of if I can honestly say, this is just a role, and there's something so much more. There's a line I have attached to my wall, and it says, I don't trust God that things will work out. I trust God that no matter what happens, I'll be okay. And that's something that I visualize quite often and have with me, because I know that's true, because I've been through things, and I'm always okay, because that's how God has it. I love that. And the more I surrender to God's will, the more power God gives me. I really believe that. St. Francis's prayer, of love and trust and faith and harmony and forgiveness. I think when I pray that, I also open up a channel for me to be a channel of God into the world, for it to flow through me. And and I find that the more I concentrate on the good things, and I concentrate on not resisting the fear, but taking that fear and walking with me, and just doing the next right action, like has been said, it's just been liberating, really. I heard a talk a couple of weeks ago by a man called Avi Wise, and he spoke about a tug of war. And he says, I'm pulling, tug of war is when I'm pulling the rope to make the other side fall down, to make me feel good, and the other side lose. And that's the idea of the game. In life, I hold on to the rope because I'm too afraid that if I let go, I lose control of everything. So I hold really tight to this rope, and it's my ego, really, I think I'm holding on to. That's my bit. He didn't say that, but I'm holding on to firmly, so tightly, to give up that kind of feeling of control, of holding on to this rope. And what happens when I really let go? The whiteness in my knuckles relaxes. There's no more tension. And really often I find that what I'm tugging against, there's nothing there. When I drop the imagery of control, and I trust that I can really relax, and that hardest line in the big book, relax, take it easy, stop struggling, is huge. I can be peaceful, and I know it because I see it, and I see it in others. So that's the essence of why I do it, I think, and yeah, why it's so relevant to me. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Risey, are you there? Would you like to share?
Hi, it's Risey. Thank you all for your shares. It was really very relevant to me. For me, the fears column was a very big one. Like, I had a lot to write out. And when I wrote it out, my sponsor just told me to break it down to see what it comes down to. And most of it actually came down to my self-esteem, needing to feel okay and loved, or not being the best or the favorite, or all the things like this. I really realized that because I just also my fear of wanting to be perfect and not being good enough. I realized that it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be how I wanted it to be. And I just got myself busy with so many things. What else can I do? What else can I do to manage myself, or to be the one to be able to do everything? And doing this and realizing, also going through the steps and realizing that I started to realize that I'm not my work or the things and situations I'm in. I started to detach from the job or the behavior of my children or or my family, because as long as I'm trying, I can try my best and pray to God, like it's been shared, to ask what's the right next action, or what's going on for me when I'm feeling this fear. And this really helps, just to sit for a few minutes and know what's going on for me, what fear is coming up, just then to be able to work with it, and realize the self-reliance, what's going on for me. Self-reliance is not going to get me very far, and just to ask the next right action is going to connect to the spirit of the people, especially my family or my work, and to be able to ask for help is also a very big one. So this is what I realized I don't always like to do, and then I just get lost in that self-reliance. Actually, interestingly, one co-worker of mine, which always had fear of, I sort of let down a bit my guard as I realized it was just so dumb and a lot of illusion and perceptions of what I really thought it was. And as I was just being more myself, being able to be myself with her, the funniest thing is that she opened up to me, and the fear that she told me was basically what I was having. So I was just suffering, and just to realize that really I'm just responsible for myself, for my actions. And some very interesting fears, like not having enough money, or even hospitals, or choking. Such fears actually went way much faster. I don't think everything is always completely. Sometimes it keeps coming back, but it's interesting to see that they just sort of go within when you're connected to the spiritual world, and these things just sort of disappear. And for me, it's to realize God knows what I need and knows what's best for me in the right time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Sarah Rivka, would you like to share?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Rivka. I'm a grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon. Yeah, for me, I want to relate to the question, the first question that somebody put in the chat box, someone who had abusive parents, and to say that I grew up in an alcoholic home, and there was tremendous abuse. If it happened, if I was in that home as a child today, I would have been taken away from my parents. But at that time, there wasn't much knowledge about abuse. And anyway, so it doesn't matter what the reason was for the abuse, and it doesn't matter. But it does cause a lot of fear. And when I came into Al-Anon, in my early 20s, I was so filled with fear that I was paralyzed, and I really couldn't do anything. And it was suggested to me to ask God for help with every single small thing that I did during the day. So it was at the point where I couldn't even get out of bed, and I would say, God, please help me stand up. And then I would stand up and I would say, thank you, God. Those were my instructions. I would say, please please help me walk to the bathroom. I would walk to the bathroom. I would say, thank you, God. And then I would say, please help me brush my teeth. I literally could not do anything. And this constant contact with God got me out of bed. It got me able to move around my apartment and my life and various jobs and whatnot. And today, you know, there are a couple of things that really helped me. One thing is to realize that whatever happened in the past, it's over. And I look around me and I see, am I in any immediate danger? No. I'm actually here in my apartment by myself doing my laundry today, and nobody's attacking me and nothing bad is happening to me. So I'm not in any danger. And that's the reality of the situation. And then I look at what is right around me. So I will see, if I start to leave this moment, I will say, I have this dish and I'm going to wash this dish. And wow, this is cool. I can turn on the tap. Gratitude is very helpful also for counteracting fear. You know, I'm grateful that I have running water. Most of the world doesn't really, you know, and I live in tremendous luxury. So yes, I have to fix something in my house. Well, I have a house. I'm not homeless. I mean, to always bring it back to this moment, what's going on right now, and the fear goes away. So, you know, my sponsor tells me, like, that person is no longer abusing you. So if you're remembering that abuse, you're abusing yourself. It's just not happening now. And the other thing that helped me was the, you know, Tim talked about boiling your fears down. What's the real underlying fear? There's an excellent book by Dale Carnegie called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And he talks about boiling down those fears. And I realized I have a sponsee who, like me, has a low-paying job and is getting older, and she's afraid of being poor. And so what will happen if we don't have enough money? And I told her that there's a really great soup kitchen in Jerusalem, and it has kosher food. And if we end up old and poor and we have nothing to eat, we will hitchhike to this restaurant, which is free of charge for poor people and it's good food. They have good cooks, and that's where we'll go eat. So we're not going to, you know, the ultimate bad thing that could happen is just not that bad. We're still going to have food. And yeah, that's helpful for me to remember, if that happens, this will happen, that'll happen. And the other thing is calling people to tell them, to ask them to help me. Say one more thing and I'll close, that I had a very big test, a huge test. And I knew I could pass the test if I slept the night before, but when I get nervous, I have trouble sleeping. So I was in a different time zone than where I lived, and I called people all over the world and I asked them to pray for me that I would be able to sleep. They were all awake. I said, I'm going to try and sleep, but while I'm sleeping, please pray for me that I can keep sleeping enough so that I can pass the test. And knowing that other people love me and care about me, they are representing my higher power, and they're there for me, and that really helps me. Thank you.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, but there was one thing someone asked me to have a quick word about, is how quickly should a person go through the steps? What I'll say is my experience, which is that the quicker I got through it, the better. This doesn't mean cutting corners to get through it quickly. It means being process oriented rather than outcome oriented. So it's not a matter of getting through the steps in 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 12 weeks. It was a matter of saying, my life literally depends on me transforming my relationship with myself, God, others, and the universe. So it's literally the most important thing. So to give it an hour a day of my own step work over and above the daily program, so an hour on moving my first 9 steps forward. When do you do it? Do it first thing in the morning. Because then the rest of the day is, you spend the rest of the day thinking, marvelous, I've already done my step work, isn't that wonderful, rather than hoping you're going to find time. If the day starts very early, there are times where, because of work, I've had to get up at 5 in the morning to get the work done, because otherwise I'm going to miss the deadline. And you know what? I went to bed earlier as a result. I started to go to bed at 10 o'clock rather than 11 o'clock. So there's always a way. If there's a will, there's a way. And on any free day, to do 2 hours or more rather than 1. And if you do that, you'll get through it in somewhere between 5 or 6 weeks is the shortest, and maybe 6 months is the longest if the step 9 is very, very long and complicated. But generally, people get through it somewhere around between 8 and 12 weeks if they put in that effort on a daily basis. And it's like getting a rocket into orbit. You don't get a rocket into orbit slowly with puttering. You've got to have proper rocket fuel. If you bake a cake, you don't bake it for 4 days at 27 degrees. You won't have a cake. You need sufficient heat, and speed gives it the dedication, gives it the heat. So next week we're on to the sorry topic of the sex inventory. It has to be done. I apologize for that, but there we go. If that's all too much, then just miss it out and come back in for step 5. We're all going to have to hold our noses a little bit for that one. So there we go. So thank you for being here today. The recording will be made available over the next few days. Please unmute if you care to and join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me
grant me the strength to accept everything that comes to difference,
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.